Good evening. Welcome to the Woodchuck Report. I'm your host, V. Chase, and I'd like to thank you all for joining me tonight. We have a couple of topics to discuss that I would like to discuss. First thing first, I want to congratulate the LP Party. We have successfully reorganized for the 2017-2018 election cycle, and I would just like to go down the Libertarian Party Executive Committee. I'd like to thank Jeremy Ryan, our chair, the Vice Chair, Edward Haybeck, Treasurer, Heavenly Ryan, the Assistant Treasurer, Enrique Cesar, and of course, I'm not going to thank myself, the Secretary. I'd also like to thank the individual towns that were able to organize and really helped us bring this together, because literally without them, this would not be a thing right now. So I'd like to thank the chairs, Jeremy Ryan of Burlington, Edward Haybeck of Richmond, Thomas Simmons of Chester, Carl Ellis of Roxbury, Spencer Sherman of Colchester, Jeff Culfer of Shaftesbury, Paul Washburn of South Burlington, Allison Popoleski of Fairfax, Mark Weiner of Westford, Travis Spencer of Milton, and all those who helped in the Essex Town Committee themselves. So, tonight's big topics will be Till Taxes Do Us Part. And for current state levels, we have the new governor. There's a new carbon state tax that is being discussed, being talked about. And the aim of it is to accelerate the shift from oil and gas to cleaner renewables, as is usually with the carbon tax. One of the initial things they're going to try to do is initiate a tax at 4 cents per gallon, which will rise over a decade to 40 cents a gallon. And all this levy will be tied to the amount of CO2 that the fuel specifically produces. For example, propane will have a higher tax or a different tax than, say, gasoline versus diesel versus butane, and so on and so on. Now, they're saying that the money raised is going to go towards reducing your electricity bill, so for both residents and industries. And there will be plans to include protection for those of the lower income residents, as well as rural Vermonters. Some of the critics are saying that with this new tax, motorists especially can just go over to the next state and get a cheaper tax, or get cheaper gas, get cheaper fuel, and then bring it back to Vermont. But there have been arguments that the pro for this is that it's going to give Vermont a better, cleaner profile, as well as lower the electricity costs in the Northeast, so that hopefully Vermont will have one of the lowest electricity costs in the Northeast, which will attract businesses and people and so on and what forth. Now, another reason they're going to have to do this is because as per their 2050 policy goals, that they are behind schedule, because a lot of the states are trying to reduce their overall greenhouse emissions, and the target goal is 2050. So some states are above others, some states are below. Vermont happens to be one that we're behind our policy goal, and so they're trying to essentially catch up. That's what they say. That is to be seen, and as we all know, this is going to be one of the tough sells, because the governor himself has been against a tax increase, especially on a carbon tax. So we'll see how they propose it, how they word it really, and how they can get it past him. Now, the big thing I have on topic for today is the GOP tax bill, both on the House side and both on the Senate side. Now, the actual reason of the tax bill is what I'm going to discuss today, so that we can look at it why it's happening. Now, for those of you who have not understood GOP policy since, Reagan, Reaganomics is essentially nothing more than a supply-side economics bill, and so the GOP has been, since then, putting out more proposals for a supply-side economics fiscal policy. Now, that's why we'll be discussing, what is the difference between, say, supply-side economic policy versus demand-side economic policy? What do they entail, and how do we go from there in implementing whichever side we want? Because as you will see, I'll illustrate, there are two very completely different things, and they affect different things. One's called supply side, and the other is called demand side. So first thing first, what is supply side economics? Well, the purpose of supply side economics is to effectively create growth by lowering taxes and decreasing regulation. So one of the many arguments is that consumers will benefit because there will be a greater supply of both goods and services at lower prices, and therefore employment would rise. Now, all this is based on what is called the Laffer curve. And for some of you who may have know what the Laffer curve is, it was created by a guy during a meeting to impress both Dick Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld, which, well, they're controversial figures, if you will. And it's the whole purpose of the Laffer curve assumes no tax revenue at extreme ends. So it's nothing more than a parabola, usually turned sideways, but not always. And in the middle is a perfect tax rate. And this perfect tax rate says that at that tax rate, the government will get no more increased revenue than if they were to increase taxes. So it gives a relationship between increased taxes versus increased government revenue. Now, on both ends of the Laffer curve, there's 0% and 100%, in which assumes that there will be no extra revenue. At a 100% tax rate, people no longer there's no incentive for them to work. Therefore, there is 0% tax revenue. And at 0% tax revenue, the government's not collecting taxes, so there's no revenue. Now, one of the things that it implicates is that if you have increasing tax rates, say behind a certain point, which is this theoretical equilibrium, there will be a certain point where it will be counterproductive for raising taxes. So one of the arguments for the supply side policies is that growth would be significant enough with this equilibrium that it will pay for the short-term cuts in taxes, and that tax revenue will actually increase now because everything's so cheap and people are spending more and have more money and regulations are less, that you'll see large economic booms. Now, this is, like I said, this is all theoretical, and it is possible if you're able to get a spending cut. So you lower your taxes on the upper portion of the tax of the producers, the suppliers, if you will, in which then they get cheaper goods for everyone else, and you lower your spending. That will cause a giant economic boom, and everything's hunky-dory, everyone's living happily, living off the hog. Now, what we're seeing currently with the GOP bill is they are doing the supply side fiscal policy, but they're raising spending. So that right there, the math doesn't add up. You can't lower your income and raise your spending and somehow expect your budget to balance out. So one of the many things that both the CBO and other economic policy makers are realizing is it's going to increase the deficit. There will have to be some type of borrowing. GOP says no, there isn't. Everyone else saying yes, there will be. The math is saying yes, there will be. So, and it's one of those many things that it's essentially their new policy is nothing more than voodoo economics. It's where the term trickle-down economics comes from. Now, on the other side of this bill, on the other side of supply side economics is demand side economics. Now, one of the things that demand side economics says is, well, you can effectively grow the economy by having higher demand for both products and services. Now, if you think about it, who are the demanders? Demanders are consumers, especially the middle class, who are 2/3 of the GDP. So demand side economics says if you're able to get consumers to spend more, that has a multiplying effect in which they consume more, they demand more, therefore products and services are demanded more, therefore the suppliers will have to spend more to meet this new demand. Prime example would be post-World War II, FDR's great boom, in which they were spending a lot, driving up demand for everything, which was designed to spur the economy. Did it work? Well, yes, it did. But there were other caveats to that, so we can't really say that that's a straightforward thing. Now, one of the arguments for demand-side economics is that it's typically built on the policy that you have a sufficiently designed, progressive tax, so that the middle class, being 2/3 of the GDP, isn't taxed the same rate as the upper class or even the lower class. And with government spending, which during slow growth, you're able to kind of keep the machine churning. And therefore, the economy keeps going, the economy keeps growing, people are consuming more, demanding more, businesses now are increasing, say, production to meet this new demand. So, and the best of the demand side also says that, well, the economy is built from the consumers up, essentially a trickle-up effect, as opposed to the supply side, which is a trickle-down effect. So those are the two big things, and one of the things we can look at is, all right, whichever policy you want, it still gets negated if there is no tax cuts, because you can't make, say, $1 and then spend $2 and expect everything to be good. It just doesn't work that way. The math never adds up. So it's one of those things that you look at your GDP, look at what they're trying to do, look at where the policy is going, especially with this new GOP bill, and everyone's been saying it is designed for the upper income workers. Why is that? Why are people saying that? It's because that they're lowering the taxes effectively on that group. But in order to have a balanced budget, you still need to be able to balance your budget. So they're shifting it from the upper income, which because of our progressive tax rate, they pay a higher proportion of the taxes. So they're shifting it from the upper down to the middle. Now, many people are crying foul about it. That's where the whole term is, the GOP's, they're a party of the rich. They're just spending their rich donors. But if you look, it's a supply-side economics bill. That is what they're aiming for. Will they get their wish? It's a tough sell because one of the many problems is the House and the Senate have they have the same goal, but they're going about it at two different ways. So will the House be able to reconcile with the Senate? Will the Senate be able to reconcile with the House? Who's going to win this fight? And will it even pass in time before, I believe, the budget deadline is January 1st? So that is one of the many things that we'll be looking forward to. And really, those were the three major things that I had for tonight. And I was expecting a call. But one of the other things, since we're here and I'm thinking about it, is I'd like to touch upon is going on the international news front, is the recent event of the president now declaring that he's going to move the capital of, or at least our embassy, from Tel Aviv in Israel to Jerusalem, which is in, well, depends who you ask, either occupied territory, Palestine, or is still part of Israel. What does this mean going forward? Well, this complicates all the Middle Eastern affairs greatly, because the whole capital issue has been a very big sticking point for the Palestinians in their negotiations, and it's also less of a sticking point, but still a big deal for both the Israelis. So by the president doing this, is really complicating things, and essentially is going to take the Palestinians off the talking table. Now, why did this happen in the first place? Well, contrary to unknown fact that is, former presidents all the way back to, I believe, Reagan, has recognized that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. But there is a little stipulation that was put in there that the president goes sign a waiver in terms of, because of national defense policy, to not move the embassy. So every president, every year, signs a waiver. Next year, signs another waiver, and president forward and forward and forward. Trump signed it when he took office, and this time around, instead of signing this waiver, he decided to forego it. So now we are officially recognizing that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. Now, it's a very touchy subject, especially since, depending on who you side, whether you're for the Arab side in the Middle East or you're pro-Israeli, is who controls the Gaza Strip, the Golan Heights, and essentially the occupied territories. Very big talking point, very big sticking point. It's going to be interesting to see what we're going to do in the future, and especially, more importantly, what is the Palestinians going to do? Because many of the Arab countries in the area were against this and are against this. Many of our own allies were against this because, as I said earlier, it's a huge sticking point for the entire region. Who controls Jerusalem? Being the fact that it's a holy city for the Abraham religions, Jerusalem being the head capital for both Christians and the Jews, and being one of the three major worshiping cities to the Muslims. So I myself is looking forward to it. We shall see. It will be interesting. I hope that the situation will get sorted out in a timely, effective manner, which both sides are happy with it. I highly doubt that. I mean, it has been a fight since the 1947 when Israel was created. It was, again, another big problem during the Arab-Israeli War of '67, and that Six-Day War. And it's here we are in 2017, and it's still a problem. So, well, as they say, let us pray, because at this point, that's all we have left. Now, to come back to domestic side, I would like to touch on a sadder note. Some of you may or may not have heard of the wildfires going on currently in California. It's been devastating. I believe it's currently at 150,000 acres and rising. So I personally know several firefighters just and about, and so from their experiences, from their stories, I can definitely say that regardless of where the fire is, firefighting is a tough business. It's a dangerous business, arguably one of the most dangerous of the public servants. And so I hope that California and all the volunteer firefighters who are headed over there are able to get the fires under control. I hope the people there are safe. And, well, this is America. We will rebuild. That's what we do very well. Bad things happen to us, we get over it, we come together, and we rebuild. That's all I have for you tonight, and I'd like to say thank you for tuning in. Good day, good night, good evening, wherever you are, and I hope you enjoy yourselves.